The ICU is almost silent. A monitor beeps in a steady, indifferent rhythm. A ventilator sighs. Fluorescent light trembles over stainless steel. At the nurse's station, a senior doctor speaks without looking up. New nurse. Do not touch my patient. The new nurse stands with a chart held tight to her chest. Plain scrubs, hair tied back, eyes lowered. The kind of worker people step around. Then the elevator doors open, not with a ding, but with a hard metal strike from the other side. A second ooh da air. A third, security cameras flicker on the hallway monitor. 4 men in maintenance jackets walk out too fast, too coordinated. One of them carries a long case like it is nothing. The new nurse looks at their shoes first, then their hands. Then the way they scan exits, she does not speak. She just sets the chart down and quietly reaches under the desk for the red lockdown phone the doctors never notice. Behind her, in the ICU room, the wounded captain, half dead. Stitched together, opens his eyes as if he heard a voice from another life, and in the next minutes, everyone in that hospital will learn the same truth. They were wrong about her. Night shift handoff moved like a tired relay in a building that never slept. Outside the ICU, voices stayed low, not out of courtesy, but because the corridor itself seemed to demand it. The light was flat and unforgiving. Stainless steel reflected everything without warmth. The air tasted like antiseptic and old coffee, with a thin metallic edge from oxygen. Elena Ward stood at the edge of the nurses' station with her badge clipped straight and high. Her hair was pinned tight, her face gave nothing away. She held a clipboard against her chest and listened to the language of the unit. Vent settings, pressures, blood gases, urine output, sedation scales. No drama, only fatigue and a refusal to panic. She did not interrupt. She did not smile to soften herself. She watched who spoke and who stayed quiet. The charge nurse slid a paper across the counter and tapped it once. Ward, beds 3 and 4. Keep it simple, do not get behind. Her voice was not cruel, just used up. Elena nodded once. Yes, ma'am. Bed 3 was familiar ICU reality. Pneumonia, sedated, stable in the way that could turn unstable in a single hour if someone missed a small change. Bed 4 was blank in a way that felt wrong. Not empty, not discharged, but held, restricted. No service listed, no usual notes. Just a line that did not belong to a civilian board, hold for transfer. Do not discuss. Elena did not ask why. She looked at who had written it. She looked at the charge nurse's eyes. The charge nurse looked away. Behind Elena, a voice spoke with clean authority. The new nurse, she turned and saw Dr. Harrow, tall, sharp, already wearing the expression of a man who had decided what she was without speaking to her. You're with Patel today. Stay out of my room, Elena kept her tone flat. Which room is yours? Harrow's mouth tightened, irritated that she made him specify. Bed 2, captain in isolation, no unnecessary traffic. No freelancing, do your tasks, let the physicians handle the rest. Understood, Elena said and walked away without hurry. In the first hour, she did what competent people do when they are new. She made the place make sense. She checked the crash cart seal without being asked. She verified suction worked. She traced oxygen tubing with her fingers to be sure it was not kinked behind a bed. She looked at the monitors not as noise, but as a language. She let her hands settle into the rhythm of care. At bed 3, she checked the dressing at the central line, the warmth of the skin, the pressure points, the restraints for circulation. She introduced herself to a man who could not hear her anyway, because dignity did not require an audience. A resident brushed past her with a laptop tucked under one arm. Can you grab labs on 3? He asked, already turning away. Elena did not correct his tone. Yes, she drew the blood cleanly, labeled every tube twice before it left her sight, and watched the runner take it. Then she watched the runner himself. His badge swung against his chest, name, photo, barcode. The stripe color was correct, but his shoes were too clean for someone who moved through service corridors. Elena noted it and let it go. A single detail without pattern was just a detail. At the nurse's station, someone laughed softly at something on a phone. The sound was small, but it felt wrong in the ICU's thin quiet. Elena used the moment to scan the corridor. High on the wall, a security camera monitor displayed grainy angles in dull gray. Most staff glanced at it like a comfort blanket and then forgot it. Elena looked. She watched the elevator doors open and close. She watched environmental services push a cart past the double doors. She watched a man in maintenance blue paws near a supply room and angle his body in a way that blocked the camera's view of his hands. He moved on before she could decide if she was overthinking. The unit's normal friction continued. A nurse asked for help turning a patient. Another asked for a second set of eyes on a medication dose. A monitor alarm chirped and was silenced too quickly by someone who wanted quiet more than they wanted correct. Elena stepped into gaps without announcing herself. She corrected a dosage calculation without humiliating the nurse who had made the mistake. When the nurse mouthed a quick thank you, Elena only nodded. Restraint did not always mean restraint from violence. Sometimes it meant restraint from pride. Just after 1 in the morning, Elena passed bed 2, Harrow's isolation room, and felt the problem before she fully understood it. Isolation doors had a specific feel. Pressure, seal, a tug at the edges when the door moved. This door was not fully latched. It was almost closed, but not enough. A finger's width, enough for sound. Enough for air, enough for a breach. Elena stopped like someone who had found what she was looking for. Through the glass, the patient lay under thin sheets. Ventilator Size lifted his chest with mechanical patience. His face was pale, bruised along the cheekbone, abrasion at the throat. The monitor showed steady numbers, steady in a way that could be built with medication and machines. In the corner was a guard chair. Empty, on the bedside table sat a stack of forms Elena had never seen in civilian care. Clean numbered pages with a header that was blank except for a code. Someone had tried to hide them under a standard consent packet. It was careless or rushed. Elena did not enter the room. She did not touch anything that would announce her presence. She closed the door softly until the latch caught, then looked at the frame. The lock plate screws were slightly marred, as if someone had worked them recently with the wrong tool. She found Harrow at a workstation scrolling through imaging. "Your isolation door was unlatched," she said. He did not look up. "It gets left, people come and go. It should not," Elena replied. That earned his eyes. "Are you telling me how to run my unit?" Elena kept her voice low. "I am telling you the door was unlatched and the guard chair is empty." Harrow's expression tightened. "This is not your concern." Elena did not argue. She asked a practical question. "Who is assigned as guard?" Harrow glanced toward the charge nurse and back, and in that small glance Elena saw something he tried to hide. Even he did not know. "Security handles it," he said. Elena nodded as if accepting it, then went to the charge nurse. "Who is posted on bed 2? The charge nurse hesitated. "We were told someone would be here. Told by who?" "Administration," she said, which was not an answer. "Ward, do not make this harder." "We do not need attention on this floor." There was the pressure disguised as advice. "Keep your head down. Do not draw eyes to the unit." Elena swallowed the impulse to push harder. Civilian systems punished the wrong kind of vigilance. Danger did not care. She returned to her tasks and continued as if nothing had happened. Charting, skin checks, infusion rates, quiet efficiency. At the same time, she listened for the unit's sound map. Linen carts, soft rubber shoes, the heavier rhythm of security boots. She cataloged the difference between normal and wrong. At 02:03, a maintenance request popped up on the computer. Replace ceiling tile, ICU corridor near bed 2. It looked legitimate. The time did not. No one replaced ceiling tiles at 2 in the morning unless there was water damage, and there were no buckets, no warning signs, no smell of damp drywall. Elena opened the request details. The requester field was blank. She printed it and folded the paper into her pocket. She walked the corridor and looked up, not at the tile itself, but at the seams. It was slightly misaligned, too clean at the edges like it had been lifted and set back recently. Elena pictured what fit above: cables, ductwork, space for hands, not easily a body. But hands were enough. Back at the station, Elena's fingers found the red lockdown phone beneath the counter. Dust ringed its base. People trusted alarms and overhead codes. The red phone was for when those systems were too slow. She checked the tone quietly and set it back exactly as she found it. At 02:26, she looked again through bed 2's glass. The captain's eyelids fluttered under sedation. A small tremor ran through his hand. Then his gaze sharpened for a moment, not on her but toward the corridor, toward something he sensed rather than saw. Elena held still. No wave, no entry, no extra motion. She met the moment with the same disciplined quiet she used to meet fear, and turned away carrying the weight alone. A hospital could fall apart without an explosion. It could fall apart with ignored details. A door not latched, a chair empty, a request with no owner, a ceiling tile set back crooked. Elena knew that if something came for bed too, this hospital would not be ready. She would be. The first strike against the elevator door did not sound like a malfunction. It sounded like intent. On the camera monitor above the nurse's station, the elevator doors shuddered as if something heavy had hit them from inside. A second impact followed. Then silence, as if someone behind the metal was listening for movement on the other side. Most of the staff did not look up. Hospitals were full of noise. People only noticed the wrong sounds after the routine collapsed. Elena looked up immediately. The doors slid open. 4 men stepped out in maintenance jackets, moving too fast to be casual but not fast enough to be chased. Their heads stayed level. Their eyes did not wander like lost contractors. They scanned corners, exits, camera placements, small, controlled turns of the neck that meant they were mapping the space. One carried a long, rigid case in one hand, too narrow for a toolbox. Another pushed an empty utility cart that made almost no noise because its wheels were new. Elena did not stare. She lowered her eyes like a nurse who had learned to be invisible. She watched their shoes instead. Clean soles, no dust, no paint, no drywall crumbs. A unit clerk looked up as the first 2 approached the ICU doors. "Can I help you?" she asked, polite and automatic. The lead man smiled, a thin line that never reached his eyes. He held up a laminated badge. "Ceiling tile replacement," he said evenly. "Work order." The clerk leaned forward, wanting it to be true. Elena stepped beside her. "Which ceiling tile?" she asked, simple. "Hallway near bed 2. The man answered without hesitation. Elena nodded as if it made sense, then asked, "Who requested it?" A pause just long enough. "Facilities," he said. Elena kept her voice quiet. "Facilities uses the internal code on work orders. What is it?" His smile held. "Ma'am, we have to." Elena, she corrected, only a name. "And you are?" He did not answer. Behind Elena, the ICU hummed. A ventilator alarm chirped and was silenced. Someone pulled meds. Someone stopped mid-laugh when they noticed the men. Elena let the silence do its work. People who belonged in hospitals filled silence with explanations. People who did not belong waited for permission to move. The man shifted his weight. The case carrier's hand tightened on the handle. Elena saw the moment they decided she was an obstacle, not dangerous yet, just inconvenient. She turned her head slightly toward the clerk. "Call security," she said calmly, like routine. The lead man stepped forward. "We do not have time for delays." Elena did not step back. She did not step forward. She held her space, small and exact, blocking the center line of the doors without making it a performance. "Then you can wait in the public corridor," she said. "ICU is restricted. You need escort and verification." A resident approached, drawn by the stalling. "What is going on?" he asked, then saw the jackets and relaxed. "Oh, they can come through." "We have a patient." Elena turned to him, still quiet. "ICU is in isolation protocols. No unverified entry." The resident frowned, irritated at being corrected. "Nurse, please, doctor." "Patel," Elena read his badge without looking down long. "You are not the one who will answer for a breach." The clerk whispered into the phone now, trying to get security, voice shaking. The lead man watched, then glanced past Elena toward the lock reader. Dr. Harrow finally looked up and came into view. "What is this?" he asked, already edged with impatience. "Maintenance," the lead man said smoothly. "Urgent ceiling?" Elena asked for verification. The clerk said, relieved to hand it upward. Harrow's eyes landed on Elena like a weight. "Ward." "I told you to stay out of my room." Elena's voice stayed flat. "This is not your room. This is the ICU." Harrow's expression hardened, offended by the simplicity of it. The lead man used the moment. He slid closer to the access reader, hand moving as if to swipe his badge. Elena covered the reader with her palm, not aggressive. "Final." "No," she said. The air changed. Staff felt it without understanding. A line had been drawn. "Move your hand." The lead man said, "Security is coming." Elena replied. The case carrier angled the long case against his leg like he wanted quick access. Elena's mind made the shape of what was inside without seeing it. She pictured how quickly this corridor could become a slaughterhouse if fear turned into running bodies. Harrow stepped forward, anger rising. "Ward, you are interfering with..." Elena did not look at him. She spoke to the clerk. Call the operator, she said. Tell them ICU needs controlled access and security response now. Not later, Harrow hissed. You cannot order. Then you do it, Elena said, calm. Or we explain later why unverified men walked into isolation. For a moment, Harrow hesitated. His pride fought the reality he did not control. The lead man leaned closer to Elena, voice lowered to something almost gentle. You are making this hard. Step aside. Elena's hand stayed on the reader. Her other hand slid down toward the trauma shears clipped at her waistband. A tool, not a weapon. She did not draw it. Restraint. Then Elena noticed something small that confirmed everything. The lead man's eyes flicked up toward the ceiling camera, not out of curiosity, but reflex. Elena pivoted her body slightly, blocking the case carrier's angle with the counter, and whispered. Smile. The lead man's eyes went up again without him meaning to. Elena pressed the line button on the red lockdown phone under the counter, hidden by her body. Her voice stayed level into it. Operator, ICU, unverified personnel attempting entry to restricted areas. We need security and controlled access now. The lead man's smile vanished. His hand moved toward her wrist and Elena stepped back, letting the counter edge break his reach. She spoke over her shoulder to the nearest nurse inside the doors. Close interior doors. Move patients away from the corridor. The nurse stared, startled by the calm authority, then moved because the instruction made sense. At the far end of the hall, a security guard appeared, one guard, alone, jogging, hand on his radio, already breathing hard. He slowed when he saw the group, uncertainty on his face. He was used to stopping visitors, not confronting coordinated men. The man near the elevators shifted, blocking the guard's retreat with a casual step that was not casual at all. Elena raised her voice just enough to carry. Stop, she called to the guard. Do not approach alone. Lock the stairwell doors. The guard hesitated, pride fighting fear. Harrow stepped into the corridor again, still trying to force the world back into a shape he understood. This is ridiculous, he said. You cannot, the lead man turned, mask slipping. Doctor, we need access to bed 2 now. The demand landed like a blade, Harrow's face drained of color. Staff began backing away without being told. Whispered questions rose like steam. Elena's mind tightened around one priority. If they reached bed 2, they would take him or kill him. Either way, the ICU would become collateral. She turned to the charge nurse. Move non-critical staff to the back corridor, she said. Keep one team on ventilation support. No one runs. No one screams. Keep the patients alive. The charge nurse's mouth opened to protest, then closed. Something in Elena's tone made her obey. The lead man stared at Elena and said quietly, You are not just staff. Elena did not answer. She pressed the ICU door release with her elbow and slipped inside, pulling the doors shut. The lock clicked. It did not make them safe. It bought seconds. Through the glass, she watched the 4 men regroup. They were no longer pretending. Inside, fear rose in human sounds, breath, whisper, the start of crying. Elena walked into that fear like it was weather. She moved to the access panel and began sealing interior doors in an order that protected patient movement routes while restricting straight-line access to bed 2. Then the first heavy air hit the ICU doors from the outside, and the unit crossed a line it could not uncross. The next impact made the glass shiver in its frame. It did not sound like rage. It sounded like testing. Elena used the silence between strikes. She keyed codes into the access panel and locked the inner corridor doors first, shaping the unit into compartments. She kept a narrow route open behind the nurses stationed to the back service hallway. She was not building a bunker. A bunker trapped the vulnerable with the threat. She was building a maze, beds 3 and 5, she said to a nurse. Move your ventilator lines away from the main corridor. Turn the heads inward. Do not block suction. The nurse stared for a second, then moved. The instruction sounded like it came from someone who had rehearsed emergencies. The charge nurse approached with a phone pressed to her ear, voice shaking. Security says they are waiting for police. They want us calm. Elena kept her eyes on the camera feed. Police come to the address, she said quietly, not to the problem. We hold until then. Harrow stood rigid with his own phone, voice controlled and furious, demanding response that could not arrive fast enough. When he lowered his phone, he looked at Elena like she had personally insulted him by refusing to be weak. "You started this," he whispered. Elena watched the corridor feed. The kneeling man at the door slid a thin device into the access reader seam, then pressed a button. The handle jerked as if pulled by an invisible hand. "They will breach," Elena said, more to the room than to Harrow. Harrow's jaw flexed. "This is on you. They came here already escalated," Elena replied. "We were late to it." The resident who had tried to let the men through earlier now stood nearby with a tablet held like a shield. "They are asking what code to announce," he said to Harrow, voice thin. "Active shooter protocol, no overhead," Elena said before Harrow could answer. "Overhead tells them where we are, quiet movement." "Internal paging only," the resident blinked. "Who, Elena?" she said, only the name. "Do it." He hesitated, then saw Harrow's indecision and chose the clearest voice. He hurried away. Authority shifted without ceremony. Elena looked toward bed, too. The captain's vital signs were stable, too stable. She did not touch the sedation. Waking him into panic would help the intruders. The camera feed flickered. One angle went black. "They are cutting cameras," Elena said. The charge nurse stared. "How do you know?" Elena did not answer. She opened a panel under the counter and pulled up the old backup monitor feed, grainy, unreliable, still alive. Orientation had shown it to her once as a joke. She had memorized it anyway. On the backup feed, she saw the outer doors disengage. The double doors eased inward. Elena stepped into the interior corridor intersection and pulled a gurney into place. She angled it to block the straight path while leaving a narrow passage along the wall. She taped a clear plastic drape to the side rail, creating a barrier that would catch hands and slow movement without looking like a barricade. She placed a portable suction unit behind it and turned it on low, letting its hum mask smaller sounds. It was ordinary, almost boring work, done with the calm precision of someone folding a threat into the environment. The doors opened. The first man entered, scanning fast, shoulders low. Behind him came the case carrier, the long case now open. Elena saw the barrel length, the shape that did not belong in a hospital. She stood 3 meters inside, hands empty, posture neutral. "Stop," she said calmly. "This is critical care. You do not move forward." The lead man stepped in, eyes adjusting. "Where is he?" he asked. Elena did not answer. "We do not want staff," the lead man said. "We want the captain." "Open the room and this ends quietly." Harrow appeared behind Elena's shoulder, finally forced into seeing the world as it was. "You cannot bring a weapon into my ICU," he said, voice cracking at weapon. The lead man glanced at Harrow and dismissed him. His gaze came back to Elena. "You are the problem," he said. Elena saw a second man slipping along the wall toward the nurse's station, looking for phones, alarms, controls. She shifted her stance a fraction, blocking his angle with her body without turning her head. Small geometry changes mattered. The lead man's eyes narrowed. "You have training," he said, almost curious. Elena did not confirm or deny. "You will not reach that room without stepping over bodies," she said, not as a threat of violence but as a promise of consequence. The hostage came next. The wall-hugging man moved fast and grabbed a resident who had frozen near the medication cart. The resident made a small choking sound as an arm locked around his chest. Fear surged through the unit like electricity. Nurses stiffened. Someone's breath hitched into a sob. Elena raised a hand, palm out, not at the intruders but toward Harrow, a silent command to stop talking. Then she addressed the hostage holder with clinical calm. "If you squeeze him like that, he will aspirate," Elena said. "You will create a mess. You will slow yourselves down." The grip loosened a fraction. Not because the man cared, but because he did not want complications. Elena took one slow step forward, making herself a better target and a better negotiator. "You want the captain," she said. "Then you do not take oxygen and access with you. You do not take staff as shields. You walk to the room and you walk out. That is the only way you leave this building." The lead man watched her. "You think you are in charge? In here," Elena said quietly. "I am responsible for keeping people alive. That does not change because you have a gun." Harrow's face tightened, insulted and stunned, but he did not interrupt. He was learning that rank did not create authority inside a crisis. A crack came from above the inner corridor. A ceiling tile shifted. Dust fell like dry snow. Elena's gaze flicked up and her earlier suspicion sharpened into a second front, back corridor, she said sharply. "Seal it." The charge nurse hesitated. There are patients, seal it, Alina repeated. A linen cart slammed into place against the back corridor opening. Tape snapped, hands shook. People obeyed because they had no better plan. Alina's mind ran through the building like a map. Oxygen lines, doors, electrical, fire controls. Cutting oxygen was dangerous. But leaving supplemental oxygen feeding a corridor where weapons might discharge was worse. A single spark could turn the ICU into a furnace. Charge, Alina said. Turn off supplemental oxygen to corridor zones only. Keep patient feeds on internal lines. The charge nurse stared, then moved, fingers fumbling with the key. The staff did not know if it was allowed. Alina did not ask permission from policy. She used policy as a tool. The resident in the attacker's grip sagged as the sedative Alina had ordered earlier took effect. It was an ugly ethical choice. It would keep him breathing and quiet and alive. Alina did not pretend it was clean. The lead man leaned forward. Last chance, he said. Open bed 2. Alina glanced toward bed 2's glass. The captain's eyes were open now, tracking, lucid in a way that did not match the charted sedation. He looked past the fear and into Alina's movement, not pleading. Waiting, Alina looked back at the lead man. No, she said. A shout from the back corridor, pain and surprise, collapsed into a wet cough as the door buckled inward. The flank was pushing. Harrow whispered, almost pleading, if they want him, give them him. Alina's voice stayed low. If they leave with him, she said, this does not end here. Harrow stared, confused by the certainty. Alina stepped forward again, drawing focus to herself. She did not reach for the shears. She did not charge. She held the central line because if she lost it, the ICU would turn into running bodies and dead patients. The attackers advanced, and the ICU became a controlled space under attack. Held together by one nurse's restraint, geometry, and willingness to take the cost. The second breach completed itself with a sound that made every nurse look up at once. Ceiling grid bending, drywall paper tearing, dust drifting down like ash. A boot appeared above the inner corridor. Then a man lowered himself with controlled strength, one hand on the grid, the other holding a compact weapon close to his chest. He landed without stumbling. Competence was the real threat. Two fronts now, the outer doors and the interior flank. Alina felt the unit's clean geometry being cut apart. The lead man stepped farther in, weapon low but ready, using the hostage like a movable wall. The resident's eyes met Alina's, pleading through sedation and fear. Harrow's voice rose, raw and desperate. Take him, he blurted to the lead man. Take the captain and leave. Just leave. The lead man did not even look at Harrow. His eyes stayed on Alina. The doctor is being reasonable, he said softly. Why are you not? Alina's gaze stayed on the lead man's hands. Reasonable is not the same as safe. We are not here for the hospital, the lead man said. Open bed 2, this ends. If you do not, I start breaking things you cannot fix. A ventilator alarm chirped nearby, a minor occlusion from a bent line. A nurse reached for it on instinct, then froze. Alina spoke without urgency, calm but clear. Do not touch the vent, I will. She walked to the bedside like it was any other night. She corrected the bend with 2 fingers, silenced the alarm, checked chest rise, and adjusted the rail so it would not happen again. She did it slowly on purpose, showing staff and intruders alike that she would not let fear stop care. When she returned to her line, the lead man watched her differently. Not admiration, calculation. The flanker in the corridor started forward, weapon lifting, eyes fixed on bed 2. Alina stepped sideways to intercept his path before it reached the cluster of nurses near the medication cart. She did not shout, she did not point. She placed her body where it forced the man to choose between her and the unarmed staff. The hostage holder tightened his arm around the resident again, shifting him forward. The resident's jaw slackened with sedation. Too much pressure and he would vomit. He would choke. He would die in front of everyone. Harrow took a helpless step forward, hands raised. Please, he whispered. Alina felt the impulse to negotiate with words, to trade promises for time. But the core of this was not words. It was control. She made a decision that cost her reputation in the room even as it saved lives. Alina Ward, she said clearly, speaking her own name into the air like a marker. I am the nurse in charge of this unit right now. Harrow snapped. You cannot. Alina did not look at him. You want the captain, she said to the lead man. Then you deal with me. You do not use him. She nodded toward the resident. You let him go, you keep your weapons low, I will take you to the door, you will see the room. Then you leave. It was a controlled sacrifice offered without drama. She was placing herself as the negotiable object because everyone else here was either too frightened or too essential to lose. The lead man studied her. Then he nodded once. The hostage holder released the resident with a shove. The resident stumbled, almost fell. Elena caught his arm just long enough to keep him upright, then guided him backward without turning her body away from the threat. She handed him off to Harrow with no words. Harrow gripped the resident's shoulders like he was trying to hold on to something normal. He looked at Elena and something in his face changed. He still did not like being corrected by a nurse. But he understood now what she had taken on to herself. Elena walked them toward bed 2. She did not take the shortest path. She took the path that forced them to move at angles past the gurney barrier, reducing straight-line aim into the unit. She chose a corridor where reflections in glass could show her feet and hands without turning her head. As she walked, she spoke quietly without looking back. Move bed 2, she said to the charge nurse. Back corridor, transport vent, keep him off the corridor line. The charge nurse's eyes widened. We cannot. Do it now, Elena said. Behind Elena's back, ICU staff moved a patient under threat with shaking hands and tight discipline. A transport ventilator rolled softly. A portable suction unit followed. Tape held doors quiet. They moved the captain deeper into the unit while intruders believed they were being led to him. At bed 2's door, Elena stopped and lifted her hand to hold them for a heartbeat. She listened. She heard the faint squeak of bed wheels in the back corridor. She heard the low hum of the transport vent settle behind a closed door. Then she let the lead man lean toward the door window. He expected a prize. Inside the room, the bed was disturbed, sheets pulled. Lines shifted, but the body was gone. The lead man's mask dropped completely. His head snapped toward Elena. Where is he? Elena did not flinch. Not here, she said. The flanker moved fast, anger turning into motion, weapon rising. This was the moment Elena had built toward, because she understood something simple. If the intruders believed they were winning, they stayed controlled. If they realized they were losing, they became unpredictable. Elena stepped into the flanker's line as the weapon rose, not to fight him like a fantasy, but to break his clean aim. She grabbed the front of his jacket and drove him backward into the door frame, so his weapon arm jammed against the metal edge. The gun did not fire cleanly because the angle was wrong and the space was wrong. A shot cracked anyway, one round, wild, tearing into a ceiling tile. Dust and fragments rained down. A nurse screamed once, sharp and involuntary, and the sound threatened to turn the unit into running bodies. Elena kept her head down, pressed her shoulder into the flanker's chest, and pinned his weapon arm with her forearm. Her movements were tight, based on leverage and proximity. No dramatic disarm. Just physics. Pain lanced through her shoulder as something tore when the flanker bucked. Her vision narrowed for a heartbeat. She tasted metal. She did not let the muzzle come up. A nurse moved from behind a cabinet exactly once, exactly as Elena had signaled earlier. She drove a syringe into the flanker's thigh through his pants and pushed the plunger hard. A fast sedative. Not magic. It would not drop him instantly. But it would change his strength in the next seconds. The lead man reacted, weapon rising toward Elena's head. Harrow shouted her name. Elena let go of the flanker and moved sideways, using the door frame and the gurney barrier to cut the lead man's line. She did not run. Running made you predictable. She moved like someone who understood angles. Her hand slapped the emergency fire door release for the corridor compartment. With a heavy metallic crash, a fire door dropped behind the lead man, sealing off the attackers from the nurses, station, and most of the unit. It did not end the threat. It divided it. It bought a pocket of safety. On the wrong side of that door, Elena was trapped with the lead man and the sedating flanker, trapped by her own decision. The lead man turned slowly, realizing what she had done, realizing she had sacrificed herself to keep the ICU intact. You planned this, he said. Yes, Elena replied. The lead man's eyes narrowed. Who are you? He demanded. You are not just a nurse. Elena met his gaze in the narrow space. Her shoulder shook with pain and she forced it still. I am the one you did not account for, she said. He stepped closer, weapon inches from her chest. You will open that door, he said, nodding at the fire barrier. You will get me out. No, Elena said. She pressed the talk button on her cheap hospital radio and spoke in a tone that did not belong to fear. ICU corridor compartment sealed. Captain moved. Staff secure. One armed subject contained with me. Send police to fire door access now. The lead man stared, stunned by that operational calm. That tone, he whispered. I know that tone. Elena did not explain. She did not give him words he could use. Behind him, the flanker's knees softened as the sedation took hold. His anger blurred into confusion. The lead man heard heavy boots on the other side of the fire door, real response arriving with procedure. He raised his weapon again, and Elena saw it clearly. Restraint might stop being enough not because she wanted violence, but because he had reached the end of options. Elena did not move toward safety. She held her ground, injured, contained, visible, accepting the cost of being the reason the unit lived. The fire door shook once, then held, then shook again with measured pressure. Elena heard clipped voices through the metal, short commands, identifiers exchanged like code. She kept her back to the wall so the lead man could not use her as cover. Her shoulder burned with deep, nauseating pain. She did not give it attention. The lead man's weapon stayed up, but his eyes kept sliding toward the door. His face had changed from mission to survival. The sedated flanker sank lower, blinking hard, fighting gravity and losing. When the fire door finally released, it did not swing open like theater. It was peeled back in controlled increments. 2 officers appeared in a tight stack, weapons trained. A third followed with cuffs ready. The lead man flinched in a way he had not flinched all night, small, involuntary, human. He started to pivot, trying to angle Elena between himself and the officers. Elena stepped toward the muzzle instead of away from it, placing herself where the officers would not fire through her. Do not shoot, she said calmly. He is contained. The officers hesitated for a fraction because authority is not always a uniform. Then they moved. Commands snapped. The lead man's weapon was stripped away with brutal efficiency. Hands pinned him. Cuffs clicked. The flanker was guided to the floor as his legs folded. Elena stayed standing until it was over. Only when the attackers were pulled away did her posture soften. Her shoulders sagged a few centimeters. Her mouth went dry as adrenaline drained. A medic in a police vest approached. Ma'am, you're injured. Elena shook her head once. I see you first, she said. Make sure they did not get into the back corridor again. We need to... Elena, she corrected, making it small. Check the unit. Then check me. Inside the ICU, the air had changed. Not safe, not yet, but no longer under immediate pressure. Nurses moved again with purpose instead of panic. Someone checked vent lines. Someone replaced a torn dressing. A resident sat on the floor against a wall, face gray, trying not to vomit from delayed fear. Doctor. Harrow stood near the nurse's station as if he had been placed there and forgotten. His coat was wrinkled. His hands were empty. When Elena stepped back into the unit, his eyes followed her with something he did not know how to name. You, he began. Elena did not give him a stage for gratitude or blame. She went straight to the medication cart and verified nothing was contaminated, nothing missing that could cost a life later. She checked bed 3, corrected a small blood pressure drift, and smoothed a line so it would not occlude again. Quiet competence, the same as before the first elevator strike. She looked at the charge nurse. Patient count, lines pulled, the charge nurse swallowed. No deaths, 1 guard injured. 1 resident sedated and terrified. Elena nodded. ICU stays functional, she said. That is the win. Harrow flinched at the word win but did not argue. A man in plain clothes arrived. Calm face, eyes that wasted no motion. He spoke to police briefly, then stepped into the ICU threshold with the careful posture of someone who understood medical spaces. Where is Nurse Ward? He asked. A small silence spread. Staff looked at Elena in a way they had not looked at her at the start of the night. Like she was not just staff anymore, like she was a question. Elena did not step forward eagerly. She moved because refusing would create a tension she did not want. Here, she said. The man's gaze held hers. There was recognition in it, but he did not say what it was. Thank you for keeping the unit intact, he said. My patients are alive, Elena replied. That is my job. He looked toward the deeper bay where the captain had been moved. And the captain. Stable, Elena said. Transport vent, sedation controlled. The man's expression shifted by half a degree, the closest thing to relief he allowed himself. "He will want to speak to you." Alina's answer was immediate. He should not. He should rest. The man watched her for a moment, then gave a small nod and stepped back, as if accepting that her boundary was part of the patient's safety. Time thickened into aftermath. Outside the unit, radios murmured. Statements were taken. Gloves snapped. The building was searched. Inside, the ICU returned to its own language because illness did not pause for violence. A nurse dragged a chair toward Alina. "Sit," she whispered. Alina did not sit until she had checked battery levels on the transport vent and confirmed the back corridor doors were secure. Then she sat, and the moment her weight touched the chair, pain surged through her shoulder like it had been waiting for permission. She closed her eyes once, controlled her breathing, and opened them again without sound. Harrow approached, slower now, stripped of his earlier certainty. "Ward," he said quietly. "Your shoulder needs imaging after the unit is stable," Alina replied. "It is stable," Harrow said. Alina tested that truth with her eyes, then stood, her jaw tightened as she moved. Harrow noticed and looked away, embarrassed by having seen her pain. They were halfway to a treatment bay when movement in the back corridor pulled the unit's attention like a magnet. The captain was upright, not easily, not safely. He had forced himself up from sedation into something like wakefulness. An IV pole stood beside him like a thin crutch. A nurse hovered at his elbow, terrified of touching him wrong. His chest rose with effort, each breath expensive. His gown hung loose over bandages and bruises. He should not have been standing. Alina stopped. Harrow's mouth opened to order him down, then closed. Something about the captain's face silenced him. Set, controlled, clear-eyed, the captain took one step, then another, slow and deliberate, as if his body was obeying a command older than pain. He moved until he could see Alina directly. The ICU went quiet. Even the monitors sounded softer, as if the building itself had paused. Alina's first impulse was medical. "Captain," she said calmly firm, "you are not safe upright. Sit down." He did not sit. He straightened as much as his wounds allowed. His right hand came up with difficulty, fingers stiff, wrist trembling, then locked into a salute so clean it looked unreal under fluorescent lights. It was not gratitude. It was recognition, formal. Disciplined, undeniable. No one moved. Nurses stared. Residents forgot to breathe. Harrow's face tightened with something like shame, because he understood what that salute meant. Not that Alina was brave, but that she belonged to a world he could not see. Alina held the captain's gaze for exactly 1 second, then she ended it. "Enough," she said quietly, almost gentle. She stepped forward, careful with her shoulder, and lowered his arm with both hands the way you guide a patient's limb back to safety. No ceremony. No explanation. "You will sit now," she told him. "You will not fall in my unit." The captain's jaw flexed, like a man accepting an order he could not refuse. He lowered himself back onto the bed with help from the nurse beside him. His breathing was rough. His eyes stayed on Alina, but he did not fight her. Alina turned away before the room could build a story around her. She walked back toward the treatment bay under the weight of 100 eyes and refused to look at any of them. In the bay, a colleague cut her scrub sleeve with trauma shears to examine the swelling. Alina flinched once, sharp and involuntary, then controlled it. The rap went on. The sling followed. Someone asked if she wanted to file a statement, if she wanted to speak to administration, if she wanted recognition. Alina shook her head. Outside, the ICU returned to work. Ventilators sighed. Monitors beeped. Nurses adjusted lines. The unit did not praise her. The unit survived her. Alina stared at the floor and listened to the steady beep that meant a patient was still here, still alive. She adjusted her badge back into place, straight and high, as if the night had been ordinary. Then she asked softly, "Do we have morning labs on bed 3? No one answered her like she was invisible anymore, and she hated that, because attention was never the point, keeping them alive was.